On a cold night in November 1875, a steamship left the Pacific Northwest carrying passengers, cargo and gold. The ship was called the Pacific. It had made this journey many times before, traveling between Victoria and San Francisco, carrying businessmen, families, and those chasing opportunity along the west coast. Nothing about this voyage seemed unusual. The sea was calm. The ship was full. The route was familiar. But somewhere in the darkness, another ship was moving through the same waters. Neither captain could clearly see the other. There were no radar systems, no modern navigation tools, only darkness and human judgment. Within minutes, a single mistake would turn this routine journey into one of the deadliest maritime disasters on the Pacific coast. The collision would be sudden. The sinking would be fast, and almost everyone on board would be lost, including the gold. To this day, the wreck of the Pacific remains one of the most mysterious lost treasure shipwrecks in American history, because unlike other shipwrecks, this one was never truly found. By the 1870s, the Pacific coast of North America had become a network of trade routes fueled by gold. California Gold Rush. Even decades after the peak of the gold rush, gold still moved constantly along the coast. Miners continued working in California. New gold discoveries appeared in British Columbia. Wealth flowed between cities like San Francisco, Victoria, and smaller ports along the coast. San Francisco, Victoria. Steamships became essential. They transported passengers, mail, business cargo, and often gold. The SS Pacific was one of these ships. Built as a side-wheel steamship, it had served for years along the Pacific coast. It wasn't the newest ship in service, but it was reliable, and it was trusted. On November 4, 1875, the Pacific departed from Victoria, heading south towards San Francisco. On board were approximately 275 people. Passengers included merchants, travelers, families, and workers moving along the coast. Also on board was gold. Unlike official bank shipments, much of this gold was carried privately. Passengers often transported gold coins, dust, and small bars as personal wealth. In an era before secure banking systems across regions, people carried their fortunes with them. That meant the Pacific was not just a passenger ship. It was a moving vault. But as the ship moved south through the dark waters near the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, something else was approaching. Another vessel, a sailing ship known as the Orpheus. And in the darkness of that night, neither ship fully understood what was about to happen. The waters near the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca were busy that night. Strait of Juan de Fuca. Ships moved in and out of the Pacific Northwest, carrying cargo, passengers, and trade goods between growing coastal cities. But navigation in 1875 was still dangerously limited. There were no radar systems, no radio communication between ships, only lanterns, lookout eyes and judgment. The SS Pacific moved steadily south through the darkness. Its paddle wheels pushed it forward at a consistent pace. Lights glowed from the decks, and passengers settled into the routine of a nighttime voyage. At the same time, another vessel was approaching from the opposite direction. The sailing ship Orpheus. Unlike the Pacific, the Orpheus relied entirely on wind. It moved silently through the water. No engines, no mechanical noise, just sails and momentum. Somewhere in the darkness, the two ships began closing the distance between them. At first, there were signs. Lights on the horizon. Shapes barely visible through the night. But judging distance and direction at sea, especially at night, was extremely difficult. Each captain believed they understood the other ship's path. Each believed there was no danger, but both were wrong. As the distance closed, confusion set in. Was the other ship turning? Was it moving faster or slower? Was it passing safely or crossing directly ahead? By the time the danger became clear, it was already too late. The impact came suddenly. Passengers on the Pacific later described hearing a violent crash that shook the entire ship. The Orpheus had struck the Pacific. The bow of the sailing ship drove directly into the side of the steamship. Wood splintered. Metal tore. The hull of the Pacific was ripped open below the waterline. For a brief moment, everything seemed frozen. Then the reality became clear. The Pacific was taking on water, fast. Crew members rushed below deck. What they found confirmed their worst fear. The damage was catastrophic. Water was pouring into the ship faster than it could be controlled. The pumps were started immediately, but they stood no chance. Above deck, passengers began to panic. Some had been thrown from their feet by the impact. Others rushed out of cabins, trying to understand what had happened. The night was still dark, cold, confusing. Meanwhile, the Orpheus had also been damaged, but not nearly as badly. It remained afloat, and in those critical first minutes after the collision, the fate of the Pacific was already sealed. The steamship had been fatally wounded. The crew of the Pacific began preparing lifeboats. But there was a problem. The ship was sinking too fast. Water continued flooding the lower decks. The vessel began to list, and as the angle of the deck increased, launching lifeboats became more and more difficult. The crew had minutes, not hours, minutes. And in those minutes, more than 250 lives and the gold carried on board hung in the balance. From the moment of the collision, the situation on the Pacific deteriorated with terrifying speed. The hole torn into the hull by the Orpheus was below the waterline. Water rushed in uncontrollably. There was no time to organise a full evacuation, no time to prepare, only time to react. Crew members tried to lower lifeboats, but the ship was already beginning to tilt. Ropes tangled. Bolts slammed against the side of the vessel. Passengers pushed forward in desperation. Some tried to follow orders. Others panicked. The darkness made everything worse. There were no floodlights, only dim lanterns and scattered light from the ship. People struggled to see, to understand, to survive. Within minutes, the deck became chaotic. Passengers clung to railings as the ship leaned further to one side. Some attempted to climb into lifeboats. Others jumped into the freezing water. The temperature of the Pacific at night was deadly. Even strong swimmers could not survive long. The crew continued trying to launch boats, but most attempts failed. Some boats capsized immediately. Others never made it fully into the water. The Pacific was sinking too fast, and then came the moment no one could stop. The ship began to go down. The final moments of the Pacific were sudden and violent. Unlike some shipwrecks, where vessels linger for hours, the Pacific sank in less than 20 minutes. As water flooded the interior, the ship lost stability. The bow dipped sharply. The stern lifted. Passengers were thrown toward the ocean as the deck angle became impossible to stand on. Some held onto the ship until the very last second. Others were swept away by the movement of the water. There was no coordinated escape, no organised evacuation, only chaos. And then the ship disappeared. The Pacific slipped beneath the surface of the ocean, taking with it nearly everyone on board. Out of approximately 275 people, only 2 survivors were ever confirmed. It became one of the deadliest maritime disasters on the West Coast. But unlike other tragedies, this one left behind almost no trace, no large debris field, no confirmed wreck site, no recovery of cargo, and that included the gold. Because somewhere inside that ship were coins, private fortunes, and wealth carried by passengers who had trusted the voyage. When the Pacific sank, that gold vanished with it, and unlike the brother Jonathan, no one would come back for it. One of the reasons the loss of the Pacific became so mysterious is the nature of the gold it carried. Unlike government shipments or officially documented cargo, much of the wealth on board was private. Passengers in the 1870s often carried their money with them. Banks were limited. Transfers between regions were slow, and trust in financial systems across long distances was still developing. So people carried gold, coins, dust, small bars, personal fortunes packed into bags, boxes, and trunks. Many of the passengers aboard the Pacific were traveling between Victoria and San Francisco, two major centers of trade and wealth during that era. Victoria, San Francisco. Some were merchants moving money. Others were miners transporting their earnings. Some were simply individuals who didn't trust leaving their wealth behind. That meant the Pacific was carrying something unusual. Not a single large shipment of gold, but hundreds of smaller fortunes, each one belonging to a different person, each one undocumented. When the ship sank, there was no complete record of what had been lost, no exact inventory, no confirmed value, only estimates. Historians believe the total amount of gold on board could have been significant, possibly equivalent to millions of dollars today. But because it was privately carried, much of it was never officially reported. It simply vanished, along with the people who owned it. After the disaster, search efforts began almost immediately. Ships returned to the area. They looked for survivors, for debris, for any sign of the wreck, but the ocean revealed almost nothing. Unlike some shipwrecks, where floating cargo or wreckage marks the location, the Pacific left behind very little. The collision had occurred at night. The sinking was fast, and the waters near the Strait of Juan de Fuca are deep, cold, and unpredictable. Strait of Juan de Fuca. Currents in this region are powerful. They can carry debris far from the site of a sinking. Storms and tides constantly reshape the ocean floor. Even determining the exact location of the collision proved difficult. The two confirmed survivors provided accounts, but in the chaos of the night, their estimates were not precise. Over time, the search faded. Decades passed. Technology improved. Other shipwrecks were found, but the Pacific remained missing. No confirmed wreck, no confirmed treasure recovery, nothing. It became one of the rare shipwrecks where the entire story seemed to disappear beneath the ocean, and with it, all of the gold. For more than a century, the SS Pacific remained nothing more than a story, a collision in the dark, a ship that vanished. Gold that was never recovered. But in the modern era, that began to change. Advances in ocean exploration made it possible to search areas that had once been completely unreachable. Side-scan sonar, deep-sea mapping, remotely operated vehicles. These technologies had already helped locate famous wrecks across the world. Treasure hunters and researchers began asking the same question again. Could the Pacific still be found? The search area focused on the waters near the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, where the collision was believed to have taken place. Strait of Juan de Fuca, but this region presented serious challenges. Strong and unpredictable currents, deep water, limited visibility, a constantly shifting seafloor. Even with modern equipment, scanning the area was slow and expensive. Several teams attempted to locate the wreck over the years. Some believed they had found promising signals on sonar, shapes that could have been part of a ship, fragments that might have been debris, but none of these discoveries were ever fully confirmed. No definitive wreck, no verified recovery of gold, and no clear proof that the Pacific had been found. Unlike the Brother Jonathan, which was eventually located, the Pacific continued to resist discovery. It became one of the rare shipwrecks where modern technology still wasn't enough. There are several reasons why the Pacific remains lost. First, the sinking was extremely fast. The ship went down in less than 20 minutes, leaving almost no time for debris to spread across the surface. Second, The exact location of the collision was never precisely recorded. The two survivors gave estimates, but in darkness, confusion, and panic, those estimates could have been off by miles. Third, the ocean in this region is unforgiving. The waters near the Pacific Northwest are known for deep underwater canyons, powerful tidal movements, heavy sediment buildup. Over time, it's possible that the wreck was buried beneath layers of sand and debris, or broken apart and scattered across a wide area of the ocean floor. Finally, there's the nature of the gold itself. Unlike large shipments stored in central cargo holds, the gold on the Pacific was spread across the ship, carried by passengers, stored in luggage, hidden in personal belongings. If the wreck broke apart during the sinking, that gold could now be scattered across miles of ocean floor, making it even harder to locate, which leads to an unsettling possibility. The Pacific may not just be lost. It may be almost impossible to fully recover. More than 150 years have passed since the Pacific disappeared into the night. No confirmed wreck, no recovered treasure, no final answers. Some shipwrecks are eventually found. Their stories are completed, their treasures recovered, but others remain unfinished. The Pacific belongs to that second category, a ship that sank too fast, in waters too deep, in a location too uncertain, and carrying gold that was never recorded. Somewhere beneath the waters of the Pacific Northwest, there may still be coins, private fortunes, forgotten wealth resting in darkness. But until the wreck is found, no one can say for certain, which leaves one final question. If the Pacific is ever discovered, will it reveal one of the greatest lost gold treasures in history? Or will explorers find that the ocean has already taken everything? And if you had the technology to search for it, would you risk everything to find a ship that might not even be there?